Yo guys, it's your friend here, bringing you another awesome Naruto what if tale. Which is, without wasting your time, let's start the fanfic. What if Hinata, Sakura, Ino and Kayuga were obsessed with Naruto? The moment the front door to her house opened, Sakura Uchiha knew there was going to be trouble. She felt an uncomfortable shift in the atmosphere of her home as her husband, a former missing nin named Sasuke, walked inside and sat across from her at the kitchen table, and braced herself for another round of fighting. Having known Sasuke since they were children, Sakura was well accustomed to him being moody. Even on his best days, it was just who he was. Though in the years since his return to Konoha, he had mellowed out and grown more friendly, but each year, on this day, his behavior would become very unpleasant and she had to put up with the worst of it. She hated that Sasuke still felt this way, hated that she couldn't do anything to help him with his guilt and depression, and that every time she tried, they ended up fighting. Today marked the 4th anniversary of the 4th Shinobi World War, a war which had lasted just 3 days but cost the lives of over 60,000 ninja and samurai from all of the 5 great shinobi nations. However, that war had also ushered in the beginning of a new age for the continent. For the first time since the era of the Rakudo Sennin, Sage of Six Paths, ended roughly 900 years ago, the 5 great shinobi nations and the many lesser nations bordering them were at peace. The entire continent was experiencing a period of rapid technological growth, with the development of Konohagakure no Sato, the village hidden by tree leaves, standing out the most, as anyone walking through the streets of the old village could see the many skyscrapers being constructed on top of Hokage Mountain or indulge in the large shopping district which was always busy. The economy was flourishing in this time of peace. All across the nations, there was widespread talk among both the shinobi and civilian populations about dissolving the current hidden village system and uniting the nations into one. The alliance between the 5 great shinobi nations had been forged in response to the threat of Akatsuki, a terrorist organization which had acquired the means to enslave and destroy the entire human race, but although the threat has ended, the alliance still remains and has only grown stronger. In the most recent 5-Kage summit, the military leaders of the hidden villages, 6th Hokage Kakashi Hatake, 5th Kakekage Gaara, 5th Mizukage Mei Terumi, 3rd Tsuchikage Onoki, and 4th Raikage A, entertained and addressed the discussions and debates which were happening across the continent. If popular opinion continued to support a deeper unity, it would only be a matter of time before the positions of Kage and Daimyo were dissolved and a new, experimental government was created to regulate the entire continent. The leaders of the future would no longer be chosen with the old traditions, but by the people directly. And none of the 5-Kage were opposed to the idea. Their world was changing so much, and they welcomed this change. But as much as the world was changing, there were many ways in which it stayed the same. Sasuke was the main example of this in Sakura's life. Even though he'd been redeemed, he could still be very ruthless while he was carrying out a mission. About a year after the war ended and he was pardoned for his high crimes against the shinobi nations, he'd left the village on a long-term mission to seek out and deal with threats to the new peace, and to locate clues about the history of Princess Kayuga Otsutsuki and ensure she could never be reborn again. Another year later, Sasuke was forced to return to the village when one of those threats, a survivor of the Otsutsuki clan named Tonari, attacked the Hyuga clan and abducted Hinata Hyuga, then dislodged the moon from orbit. Sasuke had returned to Konoha with a badly wounded Hiashi in tow, and after saving the village from a large meteor, was sent through a portal which led directly to the moon's core. Sasuke's new mission from Kakashi was to stop Tonari from crashing the moon into the earth and rescue the former heiress of the Hyuga. It was only thanks to his Rinnegan, bestowed upon him by the Rakudo Sennin at the climax of the 4th Shinobi World War, that he succeeded. Sakura had also been sent on the rescue mission, and she'd been forced to witness Sasuke run Tonari through with the sword of Kusanagi after the last Uchiha overpowered the last Otsutsuki in a battle that nearly destroyed the moon. Seeing firsthand that this part of Sasuke hadn't changed since he started walking the road to redemption deeply disturbed Sakura. After the moon crisis, Sasuke started opening up to Sakura more, albeit slowly, and only after Hinata, using her one chance to do so, pleaded with Sasuke. It still took several months before their relationship gained any sense of normalcy as Sasuke continued to struggle with his inner demons, and almost a full year before he knew for certain that he needed Sakura to stay in his life. The wedding ceremony for Sasuke and Sakura last November was, by necessity, small and attended only by a handful of people, namely Ino, Kakashi, Sasuke's former teammates Jugo, Suigetsu and Karen, and Sakura's parents Kazashi and Mebuki. As for his proposal, Sasuke could never hear the end of Ino's displeasure after she witnessed it. All Sasuke had done was quietly put the engagement ring in Sakura's hand while she and Ino were working at Konoha Hospital. But at least he'd had the decency to blush as he walked away. By no means was their marriage a happy one. It had started off that way, but after a few months it was marred by the specters of their past, just like everything else in their lives. And those specters were never more persistent than on this day. "How was your day, Sasuke-kun?" Sakura asked, attempting to maintain a pleasant tone as long as the situation would allow. "Do you really need to ask that, Sakura?" Sasuke replied. After everything they had been through together, he at least tried to be his best around his wife. It was the least he could do for her. "Of course I do. Especially today," Sakura added as she got up, leaned against Sasuke's chair and wrapped her arms around him. Sasuke sighed and let himself revel in the small measure of comfort he was able to feel in his wife's embrace. "Why don't you tell me about your day, first?" "Busy, but pretty good. Karui-san had to come in for a prenatal checkup today. She and Choji are expecting." Sakura frowned as soon as she finished speaking. Most of her friends from the former Konoha 11 were building their own families now, but Sakura wasn't able to do the same yet, but not for lack of trying, at least on her end. She was adamant about helping Sasuke restart the Uchiha clan, now that the honor of his clan had been restored, but Sasuke didn't feel like he was ready for that yet. He felt he carried the weight of too many sins, and did not want those sins to be passed down to the next generation. He did not want his future family to have to suffer like Naruto had suffered. Sasuke suddenly felt sick. The very thought of his best friend and everything that had happened was a deadly poison for his tainted soul. Sakura saw her husband's expression change and had to force a smile, unable to do much else. "You were thinking about Naruto just now," Sakura observed, caressing his cheek. It was not a question. Sasuke reluctantly nodded, eliciting a sigh from his wife. "Why don't we go out on a date? Try to take our minds off all this. I know what you're planning, Sakura. We've been over this several times now. Come on, Sasuke-kun, hear me out, okay? We really need a night out, for your sake. Let's get ourselves a nice dinner, then go to the new theater to catch a late-night movie, and then maybe we'll do something else to relieve your stress. Between all of these long-term missions and political stuff Kakashi-sensei has you doing, you're overworked. You deserve a break." It was true, whenever Sasuke wasn't sent out to address a possible threat to the peace they fought so hard to attain, most of his days were spent advising the Five Kage and several daimyo as they worked to dismantle the current hidden village system and replace it with something better. It was the realization of a revolution Sasuke had once planned, but in the way Naruto would have wanted. During his many sessions with the current leaders, offering them his counsel, Sasuke Uchiha had been repeatedly offered a position in the new government, several times even being offered one that would effectively give him more influence than the Kage or daimyo had ever had. Each and every time, Sasuke turned down the offer, saying he was content to simply act as a mediator. No one would say it, but each time Sasuke rejected their offers, they were greatly relieved. Everyone knew the only reason Sasuke even received the offers was due to the blind faith Naruto had had in him. Otherwise they would have no reason to trust someone who was once one of Konoha's most infamous traitors. Maybe Sakura was right, maybe he was pushing himself just a little bit too hard. Sasuke was just about to give in to her pestering until she added, We could even ask Hinata if she. That's enough, Sakura, Sasuke yelled, roughly grabbing her hand. Sakura had gone way too far this time. Why are you being like this? Sakura yelled back, her eyes becoming moist with tears. You know I'm only trying to help. Sasuke sighed and pulled her into a hug. He had made her cry yet again, and loathed himself more for it. I know, but you remember what today is, right? We can't do it, not today, and especially not with her. Why not? Why can't we learn to enjoy what we have? Why can't we build a family and give our children a better life without letting the past rule us? Tears streamed down Sakura's face as she continued to question why Sasuke wouldn't let go. For the briefest moment, Sasuke was taken aback by her words. Yes, he truly hated being the cause of her sorrow, and sometimes he couldn't understand why she would still let herself be dragged down by his demons. Sasuke let go of her and wiped the tears off her cheeks while giving her a stern look. The Hyuga clan would never allow it. Allowing Hinata to spend time with us, that is. You know as well as I do how much they hate me, how little regard they have for my immunity. Once I step within 100 meters of either the complex or Hinata, they won't rest until they've chased me off the planet. The last part was a bit of an exaggeration, but the bottom line was, right after the war had ended, Hiashi had convinced Tsunade during her last days as Hokage to place a restraining order on the last Uchiha. The Hyuga clan's hate for the Uchiha was still alive and well, and had only grown stronger since the war. As clan head, Hiashi could not guarantee that his kinsman would not try to attack Sasuke if he were to approach Hinata, or any other Hyuga. He had made it clear that their clan would never forgive the atrocities for which Sasuke was responsible, directly or otherwise. Any interaction between the Uchiha and the Hyuga had the risk of turning into an altercation, which would end badly. Well, badly for the Hyuga, that is, Hiashi knew his clan would never be able to physically harm Sasuke, as the Uchiha had become the most powerful human alive. But this was a matter of honor for the Hyuga. Naruto's suffering from the actions of Sasuke had translated into Hinata's suffering, and they could not, and would not forgive that. And before you ask me why it has to be today, Sakura, why it can't be just the two of us going out on a date, take another look around, Sasuke continued after sitting back down, though his voice was still raised and his Sharingan and Rinnegan were now activated. He needed Sakura to understand the gravity of the situation. How many of your friends do you see going out and enjoying themselves today? How would it look if we decided to ignore that? Sakura, I know you're trying to be positive about this, but our world just doesn't work that way. If we did what you're asking of me, it would look like we're dishonoring Naruto, not to mention Hinata. But aren't we already dishonoring Naruto by living in sorrow? Wouldn't Naruto want us to be happy? Sakura argued. Of course he would. Sasuke sighed. But I don't deserve to be happy. I would be truly heartless to accept happiness when the one person who deserves that happiness drowns in misery. Besides, Sasuke let his voice trail off for a moment, appearing lost in thought. A single tear slid down his cheek. Naruto was always good at wearing his emotions on his sleeves, and when he died, he was anything but happy. XX. These days, Hinata mostly kept to herself, rarely venturing outside the Hyuga complex, and when she did, it was only to visit the hospital or the memorial stone, though every now and then she felt a strange presence when she went to the latter destination. Ever since the war ended, she sunk into a deep depression and often suffered from nightmares. Tsunade had been forced to take her off the active ninja roster permanently and keep her under surveillance, fearing that she might try to take her own life. Now a civilian, Hinata only had 2 roles to play. Well, 3 actually, since every now and then her former Jonin sensei, Kurenai Sarutobi, would visit her at the complex and ask her to babysit Mirai. One of her roles at the complex was assisting her father with managing Hyuga affairs. She really only helped with the menial tasks such as paperwork, but it helped her try to maintain a stronger bond with him. The other was knitting. It didn't matter what else was going on. Once she picked up the yarn and knitting pins, she couldn't stop until the item of clothing she was knitting was finished. This was her coping mechanism, how she let her mind wander away from the traumas she suffered. The clothes Hinata knit were very popular among the villagers, especially during the winter months. The clothing stores the Hyuga clan supported in Konoha always had the best business anywhere in the 5 great shinobi nations. Even though she was a civilian now, Hinata received a steady stream of income from the royalties she received for her knit clothes. Everyone treated Hinata more kindly now than they once had, but she hated it. She hated that they were more careful around her, treating her delicately, as though she was as fragile as one of the many fine pieces of china in her family's kitchen. She hated that they thought she would be so easy to break. Everyone still thinks I'm weak, Hinata thought while she focused on the red scarf she was close to finishing, one of many she had knit since Naruto's death, and like the others, it would eventually be left at the memorial stone the next time she visited. They just show it in a different way. Though deep down, she knew her fellow clan members were just doing their best to help her, but that only made her feelings worse. Or maybe she had just cut herself off from the rest of the world too completely to know the difference between true compassion and veiled contempt anymore. Hinata sighed, feeling the aches in her lower back. Setting down the unfinished scarf and her knitting pins and yarn and placing them inside her purse, she brushed back a few locks of her midnight blue hair, which she'd cut short and kept that way for the past 4 years, and stood up from her chair and performed a few light stretches. Maybe I should take a short walk before I visit Naruto-kun. Hinata picked up her purse and slid open the door to her bedroom chamber. She didn't make it 3 steps out before she was confronted. "One-sama, where are you going?" a voice asked. Hinata turned around to find her younger sister, Hanabi, standing straight and looking her in the eye. The years since the war had been much kinder for Hanabi than they had Hinata. Hanabi was now only a few centimeters shorter than her elder sister, and her brown hair stretched down to her lower back. Whereas Hinata became reclusive, Hanabi was more outgoing, and had bonded with the Konohamaru Corps and with most of Hinata's friends. Sometimes Hanabi would even help the young Sarutobi who saw Naruto as a big brother figure, and his teammates, with one of their pranks whenever they were in the mood. "Hanabi," Hinata said plainly. "I just needed to take a walk. Does it have to be now, one-sama? It's getting late. Everyone will be worried." Hanabi did not like the way Hinata informed her that she was headed out. In their younger days, Hinata had been the overprotective one, sacrificing everything for her sister's sake, but now, their roles had reversed, and Hanabi had taken it upon herself to fill the role Neji once had as her protector. When Hinata didn't respond, as she seemed to take offense to Hanabi reminding her of their worry, Hanabi added, "I'll join you. I need to get out of this place, too." "No, no, Hanabi." Hinata objected, shaking her head violently. "Please don't trouble yourself. I'll be fine." But Hanabi stood firm on the issue. "One-sama, I must insist. I'll be fine." Hinata yelled vehemently, and then ran off, stunning Hanabi with her abrupt departure. "One-sama, wait, one-sama." Hanabi tried calling, but there was no response. "Damn it," she cursed, punching the wall to her right. She was also more willing to show her emotions than the other Hyuga in her clan, including her own sister. The closer she tried to get to Hinata, the further Hinata pushed herself away. Hinata wouldn't open up, wouldn't tell anyone what troubled her even though everyone already knew. She kept everything bottled up inside. Neither Hanabi, nor anyone else in their clan aside from Hiashi, had seen Hinata grieve over the loss of Naruto, who was Hinata's personal hero and the savior of the Hyuga clan long before he became the hero of the shinobi world. Although sometimes, Hanabi would hear Hinata's wailing pierce through the walls of the complex at the darkest hours of the night, and when it happened, her room was always sealed shut, just like her heart seemed to be. "Is there anything I can do to help you, one-sama? Is there anything you'll let me do to help?" Hanabi had not been on the battlefield, she had been too young to be enlisted in the war. But she had overheard the entire story from Sakura, and despaired that Hinata was too far lost in her pain. 4 years ago, Naruto and Sasuke had lost all sense of time, keeping only their sense of urgency, in this alternate dimension. The pair lunged at their foe, the most dangerous adversary they had ever faced in their 17 years of life, but to no avail. The fight was rigged against them like never before. Not once had they imagined when the war started that, as Hinata walked through the streets of Konoha, she found the fresh air made her feel slightly better. Being cooped up in an office job was not what she had in mind for her future, but then again, there was so much that had turned out the opposite of how she wanted. She had not actually stopped being a kunoichi of her own will, but was discharged from service, being deemed unfit for active duty due to mental instability. What meager resistance she put up when she argued against it only seemed to fuel her father's arguments in favor of terminating her ninja career. Tsunade had been against it as well at first, but after observing her condition, she quickly agreed with Hiashi. Believing he was finally doing right by Hinata, he had used all his power and resources to ensure she would be banned from performing any kind of dangerous job. When Tsunade questioned his reasoning, Hiashi had responded, "I've already lost her heart, but I'll be damned if I lose her life." Hinata sighed after replaying the memory. She never showed it, but even though she resented Hiashi, she appreciated that he was at least trying to make things better for her. He had tried to make sure she would live in comfort, and had even pulled some strings to have her placed on the clan's council of advisors. But Hinata just did not have the will to live anymore. That had died along with Naruto. What she was doing now was simply going through the motions, nothing more. In retrospect, she thought that maybe her father had been correct in his choice to have her removed from the ninja program shortly after the war. The incident that triggered his response was a simple cooking accident. Hinata was chopping vegetables but ended up slipping and cutting her wrist. But rather than heal the self-inflicted wound, she ignored it and continued as though it didn't happen. By the time the servants found her, she had passed out from blood loss and had to be rushed to Konoha Hospital, earning her a scolding from both her family and Shizune. When Hinata recounted the story, she simply said, "I did not even realize it until I woke up." Hinata allowed herself a sad smile. In some ways, it was comforting to know that nothing could hurt her, at least not more than the pain she lived with since that day. When Tonari had kidnapped her during the moon crisis and demanded that she marry him, Hinata almost conceded. Not because she could ever develop feelings for the alien, but because she just did not see any reason to fight. She had given up on fighting. After being rescued by Sasuke, the only thing she stood for was getting him and Sakura together, if for no other reason than knowing how Sakura felt about him and not wanting him to lose the chance she lost. However, she had not attended his and Sakura's wedding due to the restraining order her father had placed on the Uchiha, and also because she could not bear to witness such events. In fact, she did not attend the weddings of any of her friends. For Hinata, weddings were just another painful reminder of the happiness that was robbed from her on that day. But what tore at her even more than not having the chance to be with Naruto was knowing that her soulmate had never been able to experience the warmth and comfort of a family. With each passing day, she hated herself that much more for not confessing to him sooner. If she had told Naruto her true feelings when she'd wanted, maybe she wouldn't have been caught inside the infinite Tsukuyomi, maybe he wouldn't have been caught off guard, and maybe, just maybe, he would still be alive. Hinata shook her head. She would save her pity party until she went to visit Naruto. She could not let anyone see her in her weakened state, lest people tread even more carefully around her. In order to prevent that from happening, she decided to get some takeout at Ichiraku's. She knew she would regret her choice later, but for now she walked slowly towards the restaurant. Once she arrived 20 minutes after leaving her clan's complex, she was greeted with a warm smile from the owner of the deserted establishment, Tsuki. "Oh, Hinata-san, how are this evening?" he asked. Hinata forced a smile, ignoring the soreness in her jaw. She only rarely smiled since the war and so it hurt just a little bit each time she tried. Oh, I was just taking a walk and well. Say no more. It's the perfect time of the night to treat yourself to my special ramen, on the house. Go on, sit anywhere you like. Oh no, I couldn't take it for free. I have plenty of Rio and... Don't be ridiculous. It's rare to see the lovely hinata hyuga at my humble shop. I'd be offended if I had to accept your money. Of course Hinata had to relent since Tsuki would not budge on the matter, and, well, she never argued anymore. Tsuki's insistence reminded her of her meager resistance to the restraining order Tsunade placed on her best friend's husband. It was also true that she hardly ever ate out, so she had no idea what to order. Thankfully the old man seemed to know this and brought her a large steaming bowl of miso ramen with char siu roasted pork fillet. Please enjoy, Tsuki said. This was my #1 customer's favorite dish. Hinata's hands twitched a little as she picked up the chopsticks. Anyone who knew Tsuki knew who he was talking about, and while she hated to even think about Naruto, reminiscing was unavoidable as long as she remained here. Still, she suppressed the thoughts as best she could. Well, I can see why, it's delicious. She stammered. It's a shame that no one else seems to appreciate it as much these days. You know, I used to have to keep this stuff stocked up more than the rest of my stores. But times change and people move on. Now I have to put in more effort advertising to draw in customers. That's not good, Tsuki Oji-san. Maybe I could lend you some Rio and... Oh, don't you worry about it, Missy, I'm just rambling, he said with a smile. Hinata nodded and continued eating in silence. At this late hour she was the only customer present here and couldn't summon the strength to hold a conversation with the owner. But while she was eating, she silently begged him not to say Naruto's name. Unfortunately, her pleas were not heard. Poor Naruto, it's such a shame he died like that. I can't stop thinking about him whenever ramen comes to mind, he said, shaking his head and wiping away a few tears before they could fall down his cheeks. Hinata choked on a piece of pork and began coughing violently, knocking the half-finished ramen bowl off the counter and breaking it. Immediately Tsuki went to her aid, but she pushed him aside. Hinata-san, are you alright? Regaining her composure, she got off her stool and hid her face before he could see her tears. I'm sorry, Tsuki Oji-san, please excuse me, she said before running away. Hinata-san, wait, Tsuki called out, only wanting to comfort the broken girl. But his words went unheard. XX. Tsuki just stood there for several minutes after the girl ran off into the darkness, but still couldn't figure out what had happened. He scratched his head and started cleaning up the spilled ramen and broken glass. She must be having a hard time, he said to himself. A few moments later, Kiba walked by during his nightly patrol and saw the mess. Hey old man, what happened? Kiba asked Tsuki. His faithful companion Akamaru whimpered and nudged his leg, demanding his attention. What's gotten into you, Akamaru? I fed you before we left. Plus, do dogs even like ramen? Akamaru growled in response, indicating that was not what he was trying to tell his master. I don't believe ramen is healthy for dogs, Tsuki commented. As to your question, it's nothing, really. Just a small. Hang on a minute, old man, Kiba interrupted and sniffed the air. Despite the strong aroma emanating from the kitchen, his enhanced smell detected just a hint of lavender perfume, and he knew only one person who used it. Was Hinata here? Actually, yes, but she ran off in quite a hurry a few minutes ago, leaving me this mess. Not that I mind, she seemed upset. Of course that came as no surprise, everyone doubted they would ever see Hinata truly happy again, but Kiba refused to believe that, instead taking the position that no one was trying hard enough. So he decided to confront the chef. What did you say to her? He growled. Surprised by Kiba's reaction, Tsuki raised an eyebrow. I was just talking to her for a bit and everything seemed fine. But she suddenly dashed off when I mentioned Naruto, and... You stupid old man, Kiba yelled, slamming his fist down on the bar, and Akamaru barked angrily at Tsuki. Why the hell would you mention Naruto in front of Hinata? His name is taboo around her. I thought everyone in the village knew that. Now hold on a moment, what's the big deal? Naruto was a hero, Kiba. We shouldn't let ourselves forget about him. You really don't know? Kiba asked, reining in his anger. Know what? Never mind. Kiba shook his head, and Akamaru whined. Anyway, where did she go? I'd better make sure she makes it home okay. He left, but didn't make it very far before Hanabi came running up to him and tugged on his jacket. Kiba-san, Hanabi said frantically. Hurry up, Kiba-san, I need your help. Easy there, Hanabi, what's gotten into you? An Yui is out past her curfew. You know how she is, we need to find her. Wait, Hinata has a curfew. She's 20 years old, why would? Hanabi whacked him on the head. Idiot, you know why. She might try to hurt herself. Then why did you let her out so late to begin with? I didn't, Hanabi yelled. She left before I could stop her and I've been searching for her ever since. Kiba turned around and gave her a glare that reeked of suspicion. Does Hinata know she has a curfew? Does she know about the Anbu detail your prick of a father had Tsunade-sama assigned to her before she stepped down? Obviously not. You think Chichi-Yui would make her believe she is so weak that she needs our eyes constantly trained on her. If we did that, she would just feel worse. But you have to do it anyway, huh? How many mental breakdowns have you survived? Hanabi waited for an answer, but didn't get one. That's what I thought. An Yui is not well and you know it. Kiba was about to voice his reluctant agreement when he felt a shadowy presence appear behind him, and immediately went on guard. Hinata is missing, you say? Sasuke appeared out of the gloom, donning his classic Sasuke scowl as he faced down the Inuzuka and Hyuga. He couldn't care less about them. It was only Hinata who merited his concern. Kiba, who still had a large amount of resentment and disgust for the Uchiha, had to stop himself from trying to maul him like a rabid dog. It's none of your beeswax, Sasuke, he growled. Sasuke realized talking to Kiba would be useless, so he addressed Hanabi instead, as Hinata all right. Hanabi thumbed her nose at him. HMPH. So the great Uchiha finally cares about someone other than himself. Don't make me laugh. You're lucky Chichi-Yui only placed that restraining order on you. When I become clan head I'll make sure you rot in prison. Sasuke sighed. The Hyuga were still caught up in their delusions. I've already been given a full pardon, but fine. Until then, perhaps you could explain what's going on. I just want to help. Oh, you've done quite enough of that. Nobody needs your help, well except maybe that pink whore who puts out for you every night, the Hyuga heiress snarled. That did it. Sasuke was already twitching from the insults directed at himself, which he could tolerate without issue, but Sakura had suffered too much for staying by his side. Ex-criminal or not, he wouldn't stand to see everyone continue to mistreat her just for loving him. Without warning, Sasuke delivered a swift punch with his left hand to Hanabi's stomach, causing her to double over and cough up bile. Say whatever you want about me, Hyuga, Sasuke warned, his voice drenched in venom as he effortlessly blocked Kiba and Akamaru's attempt to maul him and threw them to the side, and "Mut," he added before returning his focus to Hanabi, "but I will not allow you to speak ill of my wife. If you weren't Hinata's family, I would make sure your lives become a living hell." He watched as they glared at him, awaiting a response, but while Kiba and Hanabi were seething in anger, they were unwilling to say anything more to his face. They would not give Sasuke that satisfaction. That, and knowing they would lose no matter how they tried to attack him, were all that kept them grounded. So that's how it is. Sasuke spat at the ground directly in front of them. As soon as I leave, you'll most likely ignore my warning and ridicule Sakura again. But I don't have time to put you in your place right now. Just remember that Naruto would be ashamed of you if he were still here. Good night. He turned around and stormed off, his cloak flapping in the brief gust that blew past him. What right does he have to say that about Naruto Ni-san? Hanabi shouted, still slightly short of breath, waiting until Sasuke was no longer in sight to vent her anger. She turned to face Kiba, expecting him to agree with her, but all she found was a look of shame on his face as he pushed himself to his feet. Hanabi recoiled. She couldn't believe that Kiba was taking Sasuke's side, not after everything the Uchiha had done. "You went too far, Hanabi," Kiba said. "I'm sick of your clan's attitude towards Sakura. She is nowhere near as bad as you make her out to be. Sasuke may be trash, but that doesn't make her trash for sticking with him." Hanabi went to grab his wrist and pull him off the street, but Kiba yanked his arm away and rode off on Akamaru's back. He had run out of patience with Hinata's little sister and wasn't about to put up with her stubbornness tonight. Besides, he needed to find Shino, and also let his girlfriend Tamaki know what was going on. What's his problem now? Hanabi wondered while she rubbed her sore belly, allowing Kiba a brief head start before she chased after him. Trash belongs with trash. One-sama may still be forgiving, but it will be a cold day in hell before she can convince me of what she sees in them. XX. Sasuke wandered through the old sectors of Konoha, appearing to be drifting. He already knew where Hinata was, but he hesitated to go there because the restraining order was still in effect. When he left Sakura's house, he gave her the excuse that he needed to take a walk. He knew his wife had been against heading out on his own, but she didn't voice her objections, knowing he needed to distance himself from her for a while after their last argument. Society's collective memory was too short for its own good, and he didn't know how he was supposed to feel about Sakura's memory apparently being as short as the average civilian's. He knew it wasn't. He knew she was just trying to do what she thought was best for his mental health, but still. This was supposed to be a day of mourning, a day to remember the sacrifices made by those who perished in the war. Not a day to let old wounds fester, something that Sasuke himself was still doing. All of this hate, and no one was letting it go. Not him, nor anyone else. They didn't know how, and weren't willing to learn. He insisted that he was strong enough to endure it, but somewhere deep down, he knew it was only a matter of time before something snapped, before tensions came to a head and someone lit a fire that would cause the whole world to burn. And yet, he still wanted to hope that this eventuality wouldn't occur, that someone would remember the strength Naruto wanted them to carry and inspire others to renew that strength. After taking a few minutes to think it over, he decided the Hyuga could take their dumb restraining order and shove it up their collective asses, provided there was any space left over from the 5-meter poles that were still lodged in there. Even if they caught him violating the order, there wasn't a single thing they could actually do to stop him. Also, Kiba and Hanabi were wasting enough time searching for backup that it would take them at least an hour to figure out that they needed to search the cemetery. Sasuke only needed 2 seconds. Activating his Rinnegan, he used a Menetejikara, swapping places with some flowers that were left at one of the tombstones closer to the entrance. He took a brief moment for his sight to adjust to his new surroundings, then continued walking towards the center, from where he already heard sniffles. Just as he expected, Hinata was at Naruto's grave. She obviously thought she was alone, because why else would she allow her emotions to run free? Sasuke cloaked his presence from her as he walked closer, aware that he was eavesdropping. I made you another scarf, Naruto-kun, he heard Hinata say to the tombstone. It's a bit bigger this time, but I figured you would be bigger now, so I hope you like it. Hinata took off her purse and brought out the newly finished red scarf, neatly folded, and placed it on the marker, a few tears soaking it. I know it's silly of me, bringing you a new scarf each time I visit. But do you remember when we first met? I felt so bad about your nice scarf getting ruined like that, so I just want to repay you as best I can. She then stopped and took a minute to read the inscription on the grave. Naruto Uzumaki, born October 10th, year 921, died October 10th, year 938. Hero of the world and a true Hokage. Hinata shook her head. What sort of higher being thought it was a joke to allow her hero to be killed on his own birthday, especially when he never had a reason to celebrate it? Hinata supposed that in a way, it was funny, if you had the ability to appreciate morbid, dark humor. But she was disillusioned, jaded. After everything that had happened, she no longer believed in the idea that gods existed. If it turned out that they did, and she ever had the chance to meet them, she would spit in their faces and curse them. She was torn away from these thoughts by a rustle coming from behind her. Hinata activated her Byakugan, but realized the intruder was standing in her blind spot. But his presence felt familiar. And while she couldn't sense emotions, not like Naruto once could, the gloominess in the intruder's aura was unmistakable. "I know you're there, Sasuke-san," Hinata announced. "You can come out now." Sasuke had let himself become distracted by listening to her personal torment. Kayuga or not, she shouldn't have been able to detect him even with her dojutsu visual technique. But he let that thought slide. He'd lost himself in Hinata's pain. Seeing her so torn made him grateful that Sakura had stubbornly refused to give up on him. No one should have to bear that kind of pain alone. "You know you'll get sick if you stay out here much longer," Sasuke said. The autumn air was colder than normal, and while Hinata was somewhat dressed for the weather, her lavender jacket concealed a pink t-shirt worn over a gray long-sleeved shirt, along with a cream-colored skirt worn over black pants. Sasuke didn't like that she still paid so little attention to her well-being. "That's okay. I won't stay long. I just wanted to give Naruto-kun his birthday present. Would you mind if I join you?" Sasuke asked. Hinata did not respond to his question. She wasn't sure how she felt about the former traitor Naruto called brother being here. Sasuke moved closer. Hinata woke up in bright sunlight, and did not recognize her surroundings at all. She was surrounded by trees, but noticed a little clearing not too far off, and saw two figures who she could not recognize from her current distance. She stood up but felt weakened, and almost at once she knew that something was wrong with her body. Upon further investigation, she found that her hair had grown long again and her height seemed to have decreased by about 3 centimeters. What in the world was going on? "I apologize for not explaining any of this earlier," Hagoromo said, breaking her out of her trance. "What you are now experiencing is one of several potential side effects of time travel." Hinata spun around and sure enough, the Sage of Six Paths was there, leaning against a tree. "Side effect? Time travel? What do you mean?" She was utterly confused. While she was aware of the concept of time travel due to reading through some old texts, she had always imagined it as nothing more than a superstition, or a writing mechanic restricted to science fiction. And none of those texts ever mentioned reversed aging as a possible side effect. "Those texts you read only contain partial, incomplete truths," Hagoromo said, as though he possessed the ability to read the displaced girl's mind. "The complexity of time travel is beyond the comprehension of most humans. Not only that, the ability to swim through the time stream is older than you realize. Time travel is an ability that predates chakra, making it older than my mother and the artificial moon orbiting your world. As the ability is older than chakra, it does not use any chakra to perform. However, as I told you before we arrived here, tapping into this power is a trespass against those who reside in the realm of the gods." That did not clarify anything for her. In fact, Hinata was more confused than ever. What sort of jutsu had a requirement that wasn't based on chakra? What? How? But, she couldn't even form a proper sentence as she suffered from information overload. Hagoromo sighed. "It's all right, child, you do not need to understand the fine print. But I should inform you that while this ability I used does not require chakra, it comes with an entirely different set of costs and drawbacks." Hinata did not like the sound of that. It was never good to sacrifice something that was more valuable than chakra. "The reason your appearance has changed is because your being is not connected to this timeline. You are aware of the butterfly effect, I assume. You mean, kill a butterfly in the past, dramatically change the future?" Hinata asked. "That is correct, Hyuga-san. And you are the instrument that was chosen to kill the butterfly. While you can change certain events in the future or prevent others, some things simply cannot be altered no matter what efforts are made. It is in the nature of your species to repeat the same mistakes, over and over. That is the reason mankind will always be plagued by war. In the point in time we just came from, the world you knew was at peace. It could end tomorrow, or it could last for another 100 years, but eventually war will resume and the world will require yet another savior. But do not fret over that. We are here to prevent something far worse than war. He took a short break to let everything settle on the young Hyuga before he went on. Your primary objective in this time is to prevent Naruto's death and restore balance to the world. How you choose to go about completing this task is entirely up to you, provided that you abide by certain rules. Hinata could understand that she had to prevent Naruto-kun from dying without drastically altering the lives of her friends. One wrong move could have dire consequences, such as stopping Sai and Ino from getting together, or enabling Madara to actually succeed in his plan to trap the world in the infinite Tsukuyomi. This didn't frighten her, but what the sage said next did. Now, while the ripples created in the time stream will slowly change the course of the future, you yourself will feel the changes more quickly than the others, as you are the one causing them. The changes you felt in your body when we arrived here, for example. They are one such effect, as your very presence here has already caused a change. What you thought was reversed aging is, in actuality, the result of you beginning to merge with your counterpart from this point in the timeline. Hinata was not happy in the slightest to hear that proclamation from Hagoromo. What did you say? She said, that is the truth of the matter. The soul is not meant to be duplicated, and yet your presence here means that there are two versions of Hinata Hyuga currently in existence in this reality. The moment you plunged into the time stream, time began attempting to compensate for the imbalance your presence in the past has created. As there can never be two of the same person, if a violation of this natural law ever occurs, as it did when I brought you here, time will do whatever is necessary to repair the damage caused by such an intrusion. However, you can take some comfort in knowing that even though this merger is inevitable and cannot be stopped, it can be slowed down. Well, I have a better idea. Take me back home. Even if I wanted to do what you're saying, I could never risk altering my friends' lives, not when everyone is happy. That is impossible. I do not know where you acquired your faulty information, but time travel is a one-way trip for each individual. Since the process of merging has already started, the time stream itself is preventing you from making a return voyage. Ergo, the moment you accepted my proposition, was the moment you marooned yourself in the past. Whenever you defy the laws of nature, nature responds to fix what was broken. You can fight animals, ninja, and even beings who proclaim themselves gods, but you cannot fight a universal law. As for your statement about everyone in your future being happy, well, perhaps I should do something to clear up that misconception as well. The Rakudo Sennin did not wait for a response before touching Hinata's forehead with his shakuho, causing her to black out once more. XX. Vision from Hinata's future. Sasuke did not waste any time returning home, as for the first time in years, he was optimistic. Activating his Rinnegan, he used a Menetejikara to again switch places with the flowers he'd used the technique on to arrive at the cemetery. He couldn't pinpoint what it was that made him feel optimistic, but he had a feeling he couldn't ignore. He'd felt the presence of the Rakudo Sennin at the cemetery, and was certain that Hagoromo had something up his sleeve to set everything right. However, he also knew he was in an awkward situation as far as Konoha was concerned. He had knowingly violated the restraining order placed on him, and not only had he gone to see Hinata against the Hyuga clan's will, he had also assaulted her younger sister, Hanabi. And he had no idea how the Hyuga would respond once word of his minor crimes reached their ears. Sasuke felt he had to get Sakura out of their house and take her away from Konoha as soon as possible. He hadn't sensed any onlookers during his visit, but he was certain that someone had been watching him as he tried to confront and comfort Hinata. If it was the Hyuga, he knew they would try to use his wife against him in order to see to it that he was punished for the higher crimes he'd committed in the past, despite knowing he was forgiven by the 5 Kage. He knew Sakura was strong. She was the prized apprentice of 5th Hokage Tsunade Senju, after all, but he also knew she had not been in combat for years and he feared that she wouldn't be able to fight off her attackers if they came in force. Unfortunately for Sasuke, his worst fears were realized the moment he returned home. There were dozens of Hyuga surrounding the house, along with many others who still held a deep-seated grudge against him for the sins of his past and had sided with the Hyuga mob in their desire for retribution. "What the hell are you doing here?" Sasuke demanded. "Doing what the cage would not and passing judgment on you for your sins," a cold voice answered. Sasuke could only watch as Hiashi Hyuga walked out of his home with Iroha and Hoito following him, the latter pair restraining Sakura. Worse than his current inability to respond to the hostage situation was Sakura's current condition. She was unconscious and badly bruised, her breaths were shallow, labored and irregular, her arms were restrained. Iroha was pressing the cutting edge of Hiyashi's ceremonial katana to her neck. And the worst part of all was the manji tattooed onto her forehead. Hiyashi had marked Sakura with the caged bird cursed seal. "You're already dead, Hyuga," Sasuke snarled, his Sharingan and Rinnegan locked on the Hyuga patriarch's Byakugan. "Release my wife now and maybe the rest of your clan won't have to follow you into hell tonight," he added as the ethereal ribcage of his Susanoo began forming around him, shielding him from attack as he began walking, involuntarily, towards his enemy. "Not another step, Uchiha," Hiyashi warned, as Iroha pressed the clan head's sword against Sakura just hard enough to break the skin. "Though I would not be surprised to learn that her life still has little meaning to you. After all, you did try to murder Haruno on several occasions. And yet, she was still a staunch defender of you, the biggest in fact, despite everything you tried to sever your bond with her. As it would turn out, her devotion to you is as pathetic as her combat skills. You know, we tried to do this peacefully, we offered her a chance to come quietly, but she insisted on fighting us. Such pathetic devotion to a traitor. Is it any wonder Naruto-san was never treated kindly by your bitch? Watch your tongue, Hyuga. It appears as though I've touched a sore spot. Does the truth anger you that much, Uchiha? This is a matter of honor, something you know nothing about. Had you and Haruno never inserted yourselves into the equation, my eldest daughter's mental state would not have deteriorated so greatly. You two never cared about Naruto-san, and your actions stole him away from the one person who truly deserved his affections. Honor? My ass, Sasuke snarled, spitting in Hiyashi's face. You're the most dishonorable piece of worse than trash I know, Hyuga bastard, and you aren't winning any Father of the Year awards either. You claim that you know what was best for Hinata, yet you up her psyche more thoroughly than I ever could. As for Sakura, she and Hinata were still friends. Even while she was pursuing me, my wife did more to support Hinata than you ever did, and that included helping her with Naruto. But you, on the other hand, destroyed her self-confidence, stole her birthright from her, disowned her, made her live in fear of the seal you put on your servants and on Sakura, and more or less turned Hinata's childhood into a living hell even worse than what you, and everyone else in this goddamned village, cast Naruto into. Most of the Hyuga and other bystanders recoiled from that outburst, their support for Hiyashi's campaign against Sasuke slowly fading. Even Hiyashi's poker face vanished just for a moment, twisting at the truth Sasuke spewed like venom, but he quickly rebuilt his composure. His own dirty laundry may be exposed, but he believed he still held all the cards and only needed to hold out a little longer to make the Uchiha fold for the last time. Once again, you have the wrong impression, Hiyashi said, far too coolly for anyone's comfort. While I will readily admit I was not the best father, I still did everything in my power to secure Hinata's happiness. The moment I learned she had developed feelings for Naruto-san, I took every necessary measure to bring them together, even though it meant pushing her away. I actually brought the matter to Hiruzen, but he would not hear it. In fact, his response was the opposite of what I desired, believing that her feelings would produce unwelcome complications. And yet the hypocrite perpetuated the existence of the Team 7 love triangle, going against the logic he used to deny my daughter her fondest desire. Oh, joy! Hiyashi was really going to waste time on this excessive monologue while Sakura's life hung in the balance. He was going to spoon-feed Sasuke these lies when there was only one truth, a truth that needed to be acted on now. When Sarutobi would not listen to reason, I next tried approaching Yumino-san, offering him any and every bribe he could possibly want, if he was willing to focus more on helping Naruto-san and help him and Hinata be on the same team. But Iruka-san also refused. He claimed he could not show favoritism, and said that the students had to prove themselves on their own merit. However, at the time Yumino-san was still a victim of his own hate. I wanted to destroy him, but I couldn't, because doing so would have also hurt Naruto-san deeply. If it weren't for his bigotry, I would have admired his resistance to my offers. But by the time he was no longer afflicted by hate and could be brought to reason, it was too late. My options were becoming increasingly limited. Everything I tried went against the Hyuga clan. The elders were aligned against Naruto-san, too set in their ways to realize the benefits of what I sought to achieve. Had they learned of my actions, it would have destroyed my credibility within the clan. Try to picture what their reaction would have been to learning that Hiyashi Hyuga had gone soft. Even in the best-case scenario, it would have been a political nightmare. Worst case, they would have. His voice trailed off, his composure faltering for a brief second. Maybe some part of him had cared after all. As for your claim that I disinherited Hinata, I knew full well that she had no desire to lead the clan. I was hoping to bide my time longer, seeking a better solution, but the elders brought the issue of succession to a head and forced me to address it. When my two daughters were forced to fight in order to determine who would become the rightful heiress, Hinata deliberately threw the fight. I still believe Hinata was the person the clan needed to lead us into the future, but knowing that taking that responsibility meant she would harm, and have to harm her younger sister, she chose not to accept. She rejected that life, so I did what was necessary to spare her from it, though I will admit that I could have gone about it differently. The clan needed a strong leader, a strict leader, but these necessary qualities did not translate well into raising a family. I was too harsh on Hinata, and she responded poorly. However, when you showed your true colors and defected to Orochimaru, things were finally starting to look up. During the Chunin exams, Naruto-san noticed Hinata and bonded with her, and while he did not realize it, he had also begun to harbor romantic feelings for my daughter. I had never been more wrong in my optimism. Your wife, Hiyashi spat the word with no small amount of venom, had coerced Naruto-san into making a promise, and for all those years he spent trying to keep that promise, all the times he rescued her from death, several of those times being from you, I might add, all Naruto-san ever received for his efforts was her continued abuse of him. And did you know that when Madara left the two of you on the verge of death during the war, she actually had to think about who she would choose to save? The very idea that she would be conflicted over choosing between the hero Naruto-san was, and the traitor you still are, eludes my comprehension abilities to this very day. But the worst part of all, Hinata was so selfless, she was willing to suffer from heartbreak if it meant Naruto-san would be happy. For his sake, she assisted him in his pursuit of you, and also tried to bring him in this. He indicated the unconscious and still captive Sakura, not even recognizing her as a human being anymore, together. How do you know all of that? Sasuke asked, taking several steps back. No one, not even Sakura, had ever told him about what Hiyashi claimed had happened during the 4 years he spent away from Konoha as a missing nin. A very good question, Sasuke, but I'm afraid Hiyashi isn't going to live long enough to answer it, or any other question you might have for him, a new voice answered. A few moments later, Kakashi appeared between Sasuke and Hiyashi, wearing full battle gear and flanked by a dozen Anbu ready to take all necessary actions to quell this uprising. It is a pleasure to see you, Hokage-sama, but I will have to ask you to stand aside, Hiyashi said. You're in no position to be making demands, Hiyashi, Kakashi said. You've always been pushing forward your own agenda, and my predecessors saw right through it. You claim that you loved Hinata, but all this time you were just using her to claim control over Naruto and use his genes and the Biju he contained to strengthen the position of your clan. And now you're trying to coerce me into following your twisted agenda as well. Sorry, Hiyashi, but it will never work. On the contrary, I am in the perfect position to make demands, Hiyashi continued, ignoring what Kakashi just said. Believe what you will about my motives, but you are attempting to interfere in a clan matter, and you have no right to do so. Bullshit. Some of the bystanders were left gaping at Kakashi's choice word. This is not a clan matter. This is vigilantism, blackmail, kidnapping, illegal use of jutsu, terrorism, and worst of all, treason, and at that last word, the Anbu squad tensed up, poised to strike down the Hyuga patriarch the moment they thought the sixth was ready to give the order. And what of Sasuke's treason? Hiyashi asked, again allowing Kakashi's interpretation of the situation to fly right over his head. The leaders of the 5 great shinobi nations may have pardoned him for his crimes, but the Hyuga clan has not. I merely wish to see to it that justice is served, since you are still unwilling. I will only ask you one more time, Hokage-sama. If you do not accede, the result will be a civil war, one Konoha cannot afford to suffer. The Hyuga, one of the noble clans of Konoha and the greatest among them, have done their part to aid the recovery of the village, but if word should get out that the village betrayed us, shunned our economic and military contributions, the village would collapse. Maintain your current stance, and this outcome is inevitable. There is no victory to be found in challenging us now. The Hyuga are the only traitors here, Hiyashi, Kakashi said. You hurt one of my former students and threatened to jeopardize the future of the village because I won't kill the other. Your actions today have condemned you to the same fate as the Uchiha. That statement caused many of the bystanders to start murmuring. Why was their Hokage openly discussing his intent to slaughter an entire clan? Kakashi then turned to his former student and said, Sasuke, as personal as this is to you, I'll have to ask you to stay out of this. As Hokage, it is my responsibility to put down the Hyuga clan's rebellion against the village. I can't do that, the Uchiha replied. Once this is over, I'll submit to any punishment. Hinata rushed into the clearing with a speed of which she had forgotten she was capable. Though she had only seen Naruto lose control over the Kyuubi's chakra once while Kurama was still consumed by hate, and that had been the time she was nearly killed defending Naruto from pain, that one time was enough for her to understand just how terrible that power was. Watching Naruto succumb like that was something she never wanted to see happen again. As she kept racing towards Naruto and Jiraiya, she could only hope that this time, she would be able to help Naruto regain control before something terrible happened. Even from her current distance, Hinata felt her body react negatively to the Kyuubi's chakra. It completely lacked the warmth she'd felt the last time she came into contact with it, when she and Naruto had fought side by side in the 4th Shinobi World War in her future. Then, Naruto had mastered the chakra, and it was so warm and radiant like he was. Now, the dark red chakra cloak was menacing, filled with concentrated hate. And if Hinata was already having this reaction, she could only imagine how much worse Naruto felt. She knew from reading reports of the other times he'd lost control to this extent that the chakra was mixed with Naruto's own blood, and that it burned off all of his skin when he transformed. The chakra was already trying to do the same thing to her body. But she had to fight it off as long as possible. She couldn't afford to succumb in this critical situation. Hinata surrounded herself with Hamura's purple chakra to resist the Kyuubi's corrosive chakra and jumped in between Jiraiya and Naruto, knowing the latter wasn't listening to the former's hopeless pleas and was only provoked further. It hurt her to have to hurt Naruto, but she couldn't just let him attack them. She had to do something, or her journey into the past would be for nothing. Protective 8 trigrams. 64 palms. Hinata shouted, waving her hands to create a defensive net around her. The technique managed to repel the Kyuubi-controlled Naruto, but it was not completely effective. Hinata's hands had minor burns from contact with the malicious chakra, and Naruto's claws had left a few shallow cuts on her midsection. "Naruto-kun, you need to stop," Hinata cried out during the few seconds of reprieve she bought herself, and with tears clouding her vision, rushed towards Naruto, wrapping her arms around him in a death grip. Naruto tried to move, but was confused when he found himself restrained by the strange woman. He and Jiraiya weren't the only ones left stunned by this newcomer's intervention. Inside his mindscape, the Kyuubi was left in a state of wonder, and for the first time in hundreds of years, the Biju momentarily forgot about its hate. Why would a Hyuga woman throw herself into danger like that? How did she even survive direct contact with my chakra? And why do I sense something strange about her? The woman's chakra is familiar somehow, and yet, I cannot recognize it at all. Naruto's state of thought was eerily similar to the Kyuubi's as the chakra cloak abruptly vanished, leaving behind a young blonde teenager whose skin was slowly regenerating. How did I get here? Last thing I remember, I was training with Ero Sennin, and I think I got mad. That stupid fox must have done something. Oh, and who is this ultra pretty girl hugging me? I feel kinda. Naruto did not get to finish that thought before slipping into unconsciousness. Luckily for all human parties involved in this incident, the Kyuubi was still too stunned to retaliate. Actually, it felt more curious than anything. The girl's chakra reminded it of its creator, but how was that possible? The Sage of Six Paths had died centuries ago. How was it even remotely possible for this woman to have any sort of connection to him? You lucked out this time, kid. But this new presence may yet lead to your downfall in my freedom, the kitsune thought as it retreated back into the darkest corners of its jailer's mind. Meanwhile, Jiraiya was frozen in place as he watched the scene finish. This was supposed to have been just another training session to help Naruto control the Kyuubi's chakra. Jiraiya had helped Naruto gain mastery over 2 taels worth of chakra, so he decided to loosen the seal a little to let Naruto access more, and then everything went wrong. The Kyuubi took advantage, flooding Naruto with its chakra and forcing him into that state, version 2, of the cloak, so to speak. Jiraiya had tried to act passively at first, hoping Naruto would be strong enough to take control over the new form before forcing him to resort to more extreme measures. Instead, his ass was pulled out of the fire by this mysterious Hyuga woman who happened to be in the wrong place at the right time, rescuing him from what he was sure would have been a fatal wound had the possessed Naruto's attack connected. Stranger still was what the woman was doing now, cradling Naruto in her arms as though the brat was her child. Jiraiya saw her tears flow freely and heard her whisper platitudes of relief and gratefulness as she held the unconscious blonde to her chest. Who was she, to be able to drive back the Kyuubi and then comfort his godson in a way he never could? Shaking off his confusion, Jiraiya tried to approach the woman, but was stopped when her voice got louder. I'm so glad you're alive, Naruto-kun, she was saying as tears flowed freely down her face. This time I won't let anything bad happen to you. I won't let you be alone anymore. This time I'll never, ever let you go. The gallant toad sage and self-proclaimed super pervert was overcome with curiosity. What sort of relationship did this woman have with his godson? How did she know him and how did it go past the point of mere acknowledgement? After all, unless Jiraiya was mistaken, the feelings this woman was displaying for the brat were not platonic. Excuse me, Hyuga-san. Jiraiya finally forced out of his mouth. His words managed to catch the woman's attention, as she wiped her eyes and sat down, resting Naruto's head on her lap. Jiraiya-sama, Hinata said, giving the Sannin a sad smile. It's nice to meet you. The pleasure is mine, and I have to thank you for your help back there. I don't know what got into that student of mine, but you really saved the day. Think nothing of it, Hinata coughed up a few drops of blood and started feeling disoriented. Jiraiya walked closer and took note of her injuries, To him, it was an outright miracle that she was still conscious after not only getting as close as she did to a Kyuubi-possessed Naruto, but also having the courage to defend them, and with a gentle fist art he had never seen before. Her injuries were far less serious than they should have been. Any normal person who tried to get that close to Naruto in that state would have had their skin burned off. But he couldn't ask questions about her abilities yet. She was alive, but she was still wounded, and after what she did to save them, the least he could do was make sure she received proper medical treatment. "We should get out of here now," Jiraiya said. "Give Naruto to me and lean on my shoulder. You're in pretty bad shape, Hyuga-san. We need to treat your wounds before they get worse." Hinata shook her head. "Jiraiya-sama, if it's all the same to you, could I carry Naruto-kun? Please, is this girl serious?" Jiraiya thought, involuntarily taking a single step backward from the shock of her request. There was no way she should be able to move correctly with her injuries, and yet she wanted to carry another burden. Jiraiya was about to take Naruto out of her arms himself when he stopped and saw the pleading look in her eyes. She truly believed with all her heart that she needed to do this. The Toad Sage sighed. It wasn't like him to refuse a pretty face like hers. "All right," Jiraiya conceded, "but if you need any help, I expect you to ask." "All right, yes. Thank you, Jiraiya-sama." Hinata pushed herself to her feet and waited for Jiraiya to place the blonde on her back. Once Naruto was secured, the two traveled as quickly as possible to a small cottage that was located only a short distance away from the clearing. When they arrived at the cottage, the first and only thing Hinata was able to do before collapsing was lay Naruto down on a futon. Jiraiya moved closer and tried to steady her long enough to sit down next to the blonde. "Easy there, Hyuga-san. I told you not to push yourself," Jiraiya said. "I'm fine," Hinata said under heavy breathing. Jiraiya wasn't falling for it. "Don't try to sweet charm me while you're hurt, girl. Let's get you fixed up." He then motioned for Hinata to take off her jacket and shirts. Hinata gave him a look of concern, which was only natural given the Toad Sage's reputation, but she rationalized that her injuries would prevent Jiraiya from even thinking about using her as research for his smut novels, so she relented and removed the damaged articles of clothing, leaving her in just a black bra. Then she reached into her purse and pulled out a jar of her clan's secret ointment, which Jiraiya applied to her arms and stomach before applying gauze wrap to the injured areas. After Jiraiya finished with his task, Hinata breathed out a sigh of relief, piquing his suspicions as she covered herself in the cloak her timeline's version of Sasuke gave her prior to her arrival. Clearly she knew more about them than she should. "Listen, Hyuga-san," he said, "I really am thankful that you helped out when you did. But your appearance here was just a bit too convenient, yes? I think it's time you started answering a few questions." Hinata nodded. "Such as, for starters, who are you? How do you know Naruto? Most people would never jump in front of a Jinchuriki like that," he pointed out, realizing only a second later that perhaps he had said too much. Hinata sighed. She knew she couldn't use her real name with anyone in this time. One slip like that and everyone in Konoha would be onto her. But what to use as a pseudonym? She needed a name that a Hyuga would give her, one that would not draw unwanted attention. The clan name Hyuga meant, towards the sun, implying their origins lay in the celestial. Then she unavoidably thought about Naruto, how Naruto had been the sun in her life. "Yuzuki," she answered, choosing to take her maternal grandmother's name. If Naruto was the brilliant sun, illuminating the lives of everyone in his life, she was the gentle moon that depended on him to shine. "My name is Yuzuki Hyuga, and as for how I know Naruto-kun, let's just say it's complicated." Jiraiya nodded. Nothing was ever simple where Naruto was concerned, and the fact this Yuzuki character had been willing to look past the complications and befriend him in the first place was nothing short of amazing. "Well, Yuzuki-san, it's truly a pleasure. As long as you aren't doing the same things as the rest of the village idiots back in Konoha, I'll respect your privacy and won't pry into your relationship with Naruto." I would rather die than do what they do to Naruto-kun, Yuzuki said firmly. Naruto-kun is a hero, Jiraiya-sama. He deserves to be praised and admired, not feared and despised. That's one thing I'll always agree on. Jiraiya chuckled. I think we'll be able to get along just fine, Yuzuki-san. Forgive me for my suspicions. Yuzuki nodded, but then Jiraiya asked, anyway, what's a Hyuga doing this far away from Konoha? Last I checked, that prick Hiyashi-san isn't too fond about letting anyone in his clan get out of his sight. Pardon me for my rudeness, Jiraiya-sama, but have you seen my forehead? Jiraiya gave her a sheepish look as he shook his head. Yuzuki lifted up her bangs to reveal her forehead did not bear the Hyuga cursed seal. Being part of the main house affords me greater liberties, even if it also brings me greater displeasure from Hiyashi-sama and the elders, she explained, speaking her father's name with disgust when she recalled the terrible acts Hiyashi committed in the original timeline. I was traveling to a nearby town to acquire certain supplies that cannot be found in Konoha. When I saw you and Naruto-kun in the clearing, I wanted to come over to greet you, but since Naruto-kun was, well. Say no more, Jiraiya interrupted Yuzuki. He wasn't about to get into this kind of conversation with someone who did not have a need to know. I'd like to make you an offer, Yuzuki-san. How would you like to spend some time alone with Naruto? I have some business I need to attend to that will keep me away for a few days. You two could also do with some new clothes, he added, pointing out the rips in Yuzuki's shirts and the fact Naruto had nothing covering his upper body thanks to today's training incident. Once I get back, we'll return to Konoha. The kid's training out here is pretty much done, anyway. I don't think there's much more I can teach him at this time. Yuzuki's face brightened up at the offer. That would be wonderful, Jiraiya-sama. Good. There's a few spare futons folded up in the closet over there, so feel free to grab one and use it while you're here. If you get hungry, help yourself to some instant ramen. Sorry we don't have anything else. It's really difficult to get that kid to eat other kinds of food. Well, maybe I'll have better luck than you there, Yuzuki suggested. I doubt it, Jiraiya deadpanned. XX. After Jiraiya finished with his explanations, he took his leave, leaving Yuzuki to her own devices. She put her shirts back on, then took a few cups of instant ramen out from Jiraiya's stash and a small pot and went outside, then made a small fire to boil some water. As Yuzuki patiently waited, she thought about today's events and how she had already started to alter the future. Naruto's training trip with Jiraiya was supposed to last 3 years, but for reasons that were unknown to her, the 3 years were cut down to 2 in the original timeline. Yuzuki knew her interactions with Jiraiya and Naruto today had further reduced the time Jiraiya intended to keep Naruto away from Konoha to roughly 9.5 months. Whether Yuzuki's intervention was good in that regard remained to be seen. As for Naruto, neither she nor the rest of his friends had been able to see him during his time away from their village, so no one had had a chance to watch him grow. In Yuzuki's time, Naruto had stood at 166 centimeters upon his return to Konoha and had grown to almost 173 centimeters before his death. He was shorter now, not as short as he'd been when he left, but it would still be a while before he caught up to his past growth. She guessed he was about 155 centimeters right now, making him still slightly shorter than her younger self. He was also a bit more muscular than she'd remembered him being when he returned. Yuzuki sighed as she took the pot off the fire pit and poured its contents into the cups, waiting out the 3 minutes needed for the noodles to soak in the water. It didn't matter what age Naruto was. He still looked like a prince, her prince. But he wasn't really her prince anymore. Yuzuki knew that Naruto belonged to her younger self, and that she could not share the same place in his heart. And yet, she found herself feeling jealous of her counterpart. The thought made Yuzuki laugh bitterly as she stuck her chopsticks into the ramen cup and began eating. How could she have imagined there would be a day when she would be jealous of herself? Once her appetite was sated, Yuzuki walked back inside and laid down on the couch. As much as she needed Naruto, she didn't think she would be able to sleep if she was in the same room as him. But as it would turn out, she wouldn't be able to sleep anyway. XX. An older Naruto's eyes shot open, his panic accompanied by heavy breathing. What had happened to him felt like the longest, worst dream ever, and worse still, it had felt so real. This Naruto looked down to check his chest, and to his relief, there was no kunai protruding from there. No kunai, no zetsu, no obito, no madara, no kayuga, and none of the other horrors of that war. Maybe it wasn't real, maybe it was all just a dream. It had to be a dream, because here he was at Ero Sennin's cottage. Wait a minute. This is the place me and Ero Sennin lived in during my training. Just how much of that was a dream? Frantic, he raced to the door. He needed to find Jiraiya now so he could make sense of everything that had played out in his head. But the moment he got near the door, it threw him back with a large electric shock. Naruto moaned in pain as he pushed himself back to his feet. What the hell was that? He instinctively reached into his ninja tools pouch, bracing for a fight, but the pouch wasn't attached. Confused, he then looked towards the door only to find there was no sign of damage. A blast like that should have blown a large hole in the cottage, he reasoned, but there was absolutely no evidence that anything had happened. Just what on earth was going on? Also, why did his body feel so weird, like it wasn't even there? Naruto checked his arms and found that they kept flickering in and out of this plane of existence. He also found that he was no longer wearing his tattered orange tracksuit and mesh armor, but was clothed in just a white burial kimono and nothing else. What in the... Naruto-kun, a soft voice stammered, snapping him out of his thoughts. Naruto spun around and saw a young woman who couldn't be older than 20 resting on a couch just a meter away. The woman's features caught his attention immediately. The long, midnight blue hair styled in a Heim cut, the cutest round face, and those eyes, he knew those eyes. Hinata, Naruto yelled, but his voice went unheard. But being unable to speak wasn't even the worst part of it all. If Hinata was that age, then... it wasn't a dream. I really died, didn't I? But, that also means... Naruto took a few steps back as he recalled the words Hinata had said to him on that day, the day they lost each other forever. From the moment I first met you, Naruto-kun, I was destined to fall in love with you and only you. Please live, Naruto-kun. Live for me, live for your friends, but live for yourself too. You can't die, not now. I need you to live. I love you too much to let you die. And he remembered the single kiss he'd managed to share with her before passing on. But before Naruto could figure out how he was supposed to respond to this latest mess, Hinata flung herself at him, tears streaming down her face. Naruto stood firm and held his arms open to catch her, but... ouch! Hinata screamed, jumping right through Naruto and crashing into the small table, the impact from her knees splitting it in two. Hinata moaned in pain and Naruto snapped around and took a closer look at her, noticing how her stomach and arms were wrapped in bandages, and observing that she could soon add bruises and splinters to the list of injuries she'd recently incurred. Naruto tried to reach down to help her, but his hands just went right through her, like he wasn't even there. Great. Just great. I die and come back to life, only now I'm a freaking ghost. On top of that, I can't even speak. Why did those scary movies have to lie to me about ghosts still having vocal cords? Naruto would have entered an internal rant about ghosts and his fear of them, but his priorities were readjusted again by Hinata's sniffles as shish. While Naruto finished up with breakfast, Yuzuki remained inside to look for any spare clothes she and him could wear during their brief trip to a nearby village. To her dismay, all that was left was a black t-shirt and shorts that would definitely not fit her. Yuzuki sighed and took out a needle and some thread from her purse, and spent the next hour sewing her torn clothes so they would be somewhat more presentable when she left, while Naruto ran off to bathe in a nearby stream. Normally, the journey to the small village would have taken about 12 hours at a civilian's pace, but Yuzuki and Naruto's ninja training cut the time down to a fourth of that. As they jumped from tree branch to tree branch, Yuzuki's thoughts wandered, focusing on recent events. First was learning that the disembodied spirit of her Naruto had also made the journey across time. She would have to come up with a pseudonym for him in case it was ever revealed that a Yurei, faint spirit, was anchored to her. She knew the younger, living Naruto would quickly get confused if he kept hearing her call out to her Naruto, thinking she was calling for him. If she made that mistake enough times, he would even start to suspect that something was wrong. And then there was the traumatic vision Hagoromo showed her. She saw the ghost Naruto glance at her and saw the worry on his face, and knew why he was so worried. It wasn't hard to tell that Yuzuki was on the verge of another mental breakdown, and who could blame her? Watching your entire clan be murdered in a single night by your soulmate's best friend, then seeing said soulmate return to life but being unable to touch him would put anyone over the edge. Thankfully, her Naruto was doing his best to keep her from going off the deep end, but there was only so much she could still take. She wasn't as strong as her Naruto believed her to be, not anymore. Once they arrived at the village, Yuzuki seated herself on a bench just outside of a small clothing store while the younger Naruto went inside. She allowed herself a small smile, knowing this would be when Naruto started to wear the orange and black tracksuit that was his favored clothing throughout his teenage years. But did she have enough ryo on hand from before she was sent back in time to purchase the apparel? Yuzuki checked her purse again, causing her ghost Naruto to look at her in surprise as the sudden movement caught him off guard. Apparently, she had only carried a measly 10,000 ryo with her when she went out on her last night in the future. The money would be sufficient for a limited amount of necessities, but nothing else. It would not last longer than a few weeks. This discovery confirmed to Yuzuki that she would have to be reinstated into Konoha's military forces using her pseudonym. If money had been the only problem, she could have just found a job as a seamstress. She had accumulated millions of unspent ryo from her knitting in the future. If she'd had any clue that the Rakudo Sennin planned to do this to her, she would have withdrawn a lot more from the clan's communal funds before she abandoned her clan to its fate. Yuzuki wanted to laugh at the thought, but kept silent. It was certainly strange that she would still be considered a Hyuga by the villagers but would not be able to access the Hyuga treasuries. But for now, it was enough to know that she could still afford to buy Naruto his new clothes. Whether she could successfully get reinstated into the shinobi program was iffy. She had not done any serious training since the day her Naruto died, so she would have to take the rest of the time she had before her and the younger Naruto's return to Konoha to brush up on her skills and get back in shape. Yuzuki was about to close her purse when she noticed the item Sasuke had slipped into there on that hellish night, a scroll sealed with the Uchiha emblem. In her sadness, she sighed. It would hurt to read this scroll, knowing what Sasuke had done in the future after she left, but it had to be done. She could not let herself be hindered by her emotions. Yuzuki didn't want to hate Sasuke. Her hate was reserved solely for Zetsu, the homunculus who killed Naruto while she was still in her dream world, but as compassionate as Yuzuki was, what Sasuke had done was still unforgivable. His actions after she went back in time would always affect her. Yuzuki channeled a small amount of chakra into the scroll to break the seal. When she opened it, her eyes went wide. She showed it to the ghost Naruto, who was already trembling in rage as he took it out of her hands and began to read. Hinata, please forgive my lack of courage for communicating my thoughts in this form. What I'm about to tell you in this scroll is something I should have confessed in person, rather than resort to using a shadow clone to write down the words while we comforted one another at Naruto's grave. If I had spoken the words aloud, surely you would have gone back on what you said to me and started to hate me. But there are some things you need to know before you accept the second chance Hagoromo will offer you to set things right. Yes, the Sage of Six Paths appeared to me and warned me about what will soon transpire. But you are the only one who has the power to change things. You are still filled with the light of hope and love, while I have become the shinobi of darkness. I do not have any light left in me to call my own. Yet you, Naruto and Sakura have all shared your light with me, and I am eternally grateful for that, knowing I deserve only hatred for the things I've done. The Hyuga clan's hatred towards me has pushed them to the brink of rebellion against the village. Hiashi may have tried to keep his clansmen at bay, but I fear he has now lost reason and succumbed to their mob mentality, and will attempt to use Sakura against me to deliver the Hyuga's twisted version of justice. But I suppose I don't blame him for seeking my death. The Shinobi Alliance may have acquitted me of the crimes I committed as a missing nin, but every day since the war ended, I have been burdened with the knowledge that I should have died for my transgressions. I'm the one who should have been killed in the war, not Naruto. But you would rather suffer alone than be selfish. You never would have allowed me to sacrifice myself to bring him back. You never would have wanted me to trade my life for his, claiming that I would be sacrificing Sakura's happiness for yours. Your guilt would have pushed you away from Naruto, tainting the relationship between you and him, and you managed to convince me that I could not, in good conscience, bring him back to life only for his life to be destroyed once more. When you said you didn't hate me, I felt true joy for the first time since the days before Itachi carried out the massacre of my clan. I felt that maybe there was a chance that I could do as you wanted, and give Sakura the happiness she deserved. But by the time you read this, it is most likely too late. The nightmare world we live in is on the brink of collapse, and I might well be the person who brings about that collapse. I don't have the strength you possess, Hinata. I cannot suffer the pain from Sakura's death like you were able to endure the loss of Naruto for so long. My only chance to keep my redemption is to take Sakura far away from the village and live the rest of my days in seclusion. If I lose her, I will lose my soul to the shadows forever. Should that fear be realized, this is what I need you to do. I won't go into details about the truth behind the Uchiha clan downfall. There are a few others who know what really happened that night, including Naruto. If you've contacted his ghost like I heard some others claim, I hope he has broken his oath to secrecy and told you. If he has yet to do so, then he needs to tell you right away. You'd be more likely to believe it coming from him than you would me. Either way, you need to bring me back to Konoha as soon as possible. I don't care what you have to do to snatch me away from Orochimaru's lair. If you have to break every bone in my body, as I recall Naruto once threatening to do, then do it. If you can't defeat me on your own, then find a way to warn Itachi about what will happen if you cannot force me to return home, and my big brother will understand and aid you. No matter what else happens, you must bring me back before I succumb to the curse of hatred as completely as I did in the original timeline. And if you cannot save me, then you will need to kill me. If it is already too late for me even in the past, if I am already damned to the pits of hell regardless, then so be it. Should that be the case, then I would ask only that you remember the man I was before I allowed my demons to consume me, and that you finally let yourself be selfish and choose to be happy with Naruto rather than suffer alone any longer. Goodbye, Hinata. Sasuke. The ghost Naruto exerted all the pressure he could to crush the scroll and throw it through the air, not caring that it hit the clerk in the head, who turned around to wonder what just happened, but being unable to see him, shrugged it off and continued reading his magazine. He had no idea that he was also transferring his anger to his younger, living counterpart, and would only later realize the consequences of his rage. That two-bit lying, psychopathic son of a bitch. The ghost Naruto yelled despite knowing his voice would never be heard. He got Sakura-chan killed, he murdered Kakashi-sensei, Hinata's entire clan, B-san and Gaara, and then he sent Hinata back here with almost no new information while expecting her to fix his. I can deal with him on my own, but forcing all of that on her is the last straw. In his anger, he completely forgot about the electric shock that would hit him each time he tried to wander too far from Yuzuki, and only remembered after he stomped off to try and find Sasuke only to be sent flying back towards Yuzuki. And if that wasn't bad enough, I'm a ghost now, and a chained one to boot. he complained as he flew right through Yuzuki and landed in front of her. "Are you okay, Naruto-kun?" Yuzuki asked, getting a few strange looks from people who were passing by. She sighed, having forgotten that she was the only one who could see her Naruto. Despite knowing that it was impossible for her Naruto to die, she could not help but worry about him. But her question went unheard as the ghost Naruto went back to the edge of the spiritual barrier and pounded his fists against it, silently screaming with each blow dealt in a vain attempt to break free of his confinement so he could go find Sasuke and beat his ass into the ground. Yuzuki, not knowing why he was doing this, thought he was angry at her for being anchored to her, and dropped to her knees and began crying, not caring how humiliating or embarrassing it was for a Hyuga to openly display their emotions. Was she to be punished yet again because she had been selfish? She had been happy when she learned that her Naruto had to stay at her side no matter what, but now she was reminded of how unfair it was to him that he was tied down like this. The ghost Naruto heard Yuzuki's tears and smacked himself in the face. Damn it, I made her cry again, he thought to himself, and hated himself even more. He was about to take Yuzuki into his arms and let her cry on his shoulders when they heard a loud crashing noise from inside the clothing store. That alone would have got anyone's attention, but what made it worse was the unadulterated rage which was emanating from inside. Something was wrong, very, very wrong. Without a second thought, Yuzuki activated her Byakugan and ran into the store, and saw the living Naruto hunched over and gripping his head. What in the world? Yuzuki thought. From what she could see, Naruto's heartbeat was accelerating at an alarming rate and his chakra network was like a raging river. She could even see traces of it actually leaving his body. What was more was that Naruto was growling like a beast. His eyes had not quite turned red, but his whiskers were enlarged and he was dangerously close to losing control. "Hey kid, you better pay for that mess you made," the clerk shouted. Naruto ignored him and took a coat hanger and threw it at some nicely folded pants on one of the shelves that wasn't yet knocked over, sending the clothing that was on display there flying everywhere. What's going on? Get out of my head," Naruto yelled as he lost his balance and tumbled into some more coat hangers. He was still rolling around, clutching his head in pain when Yuzuki got to him. "Naruto-kun," Yuzuki cried, running to him and gripping his shoulders. "Naruto-kun, what's wrong? Why are you doing this?" Yuzuki asked quickly. "Aggggg. It hurts. Make it stop, make it stop," Naruto yelled. "Naruto-kun, calm down. What hurts? That's it, get that boy out of my shop," the clerk yelled as he grabbed a broom and went for Naruto. But just as he was about to bring the broom down on his head, Yuzuki grabbed the handle and let her midnight blue hair fall over her eyes. "You really don't want to do that," she said in a low threatening voice. "What the hell are you doing, lady? Is he your brat? Then you need to leave now before I call the authorities," the clerk raged. Holding Naruto as close to her as possible, she looked up at the man, her Byakugan seemingly piercing through his soul. The glare was intense enough that the clerk lost control over his bladder. "I said you really don't want to do that," she hissed, snapping the broom in half with just her grip. Then she stood up, still holding Naruto in one arm and the broken broom in the other, and looked down at the man as if she were a giant. "If you dare lay a finger on Naruto-kun, the next thing I snap will be your neck, am I clear?" she asked. Naruto felt himself relax in Yuzuki's embrace as he watched her verbally lay into the clerk. He had only met her a few hours ago, but already she was jumping to his defense and threatening a man on his behalf. He wasn't sure whether he should be happy or not on that last point, but he was definitely happy that she was willing to defend him. "Oh okay Hyuga-sama, whatever you say," the man stuttered. "Good. Now, you are going to let Naruto-kun get whatever he wants, aren't you?" Yuzuki asked. Yes ma'am, but I'll still get paid, right?" he asked. A second later, he regretted saying those words as Yuzuki shifted her head to glance at the wall and noticed a very important detail that made her anger towards him worse. There was a very specific ceramic mask hanging on the wall, a fox-themed mask similar to those worn by the Anbu. "It's you," Yuzuki nearly howled. "You're that merchant, the one who mistreated Naruto-kun so much back in Konoha." "What of it?" he sneered. "Are you going to pay me or will I have to call for the authorities after all?" Yuzuki's eyes narrowed as she dropped the broken handle and pressed her newly empty palm against his chest. "You have 5 minutes to leave this village and never return. After what you did to Naruto-kun in the past and what you were going to do to him just now, you will be fortunate if the Hyuga clan ever lets you do business anywhere in the Land of Fire again." The merchant did not say another word as he ran for his life. XX. Yuzuki smirked as the merchant bolted out the door. A part of her had always wanted to do that in her timeline when people had closed their doors to Naruto, but due to her lack of self-confidence she had never got the chance. Thankfully said problem no longer seemed to matter to her anymore. Naruto and his well-being came first, before everything else. She did feel a little guilty about stealing from the merchant after sending him packing, but she tried to reason that this one time, he deserved it for how he treated Naruto-kun back when she and Naruto-kun were still kids. Besides, she was a kunoichi. It was unreasonable of her to expect that she would never have to appropriate any resources from others. To Yuzuki's surprise, Naruto had ultimately opted out of wearing the same orange and black tracksuit he'd donned when he returned to Konoha. Instead, he was now sporting a black hooded jacket with a yellow flame pattern along the bottom, and black sports pants which had a single orange stripe running down each leg. He also carried the fox mask in his arms after Yuzuki insisted on giving it to him, like he'd originally wanted several years ago. As Yuzuki and Naruto jumped across the trees on their way back to Jiraiya's cottage, she wondered if his new clothes were a result of the influence she and Naruto's older, spectral self were already exerting over this timeline. But there was another detail that was more significant. What came over him? Yuzuki wondered, thinking back to the incident inside the now permanently closed clothing store. He wasn't just angry, he seemed like he was in pain. She also remembered from the reports on prior incidents how he would often suffer from memory loss after the chakra receded. Usually Naruto was able to tell when the fox tried to exert its will through its chakra, and 9 times out of 10 he would force it back without issue. But Naruto couldn't tell her why he had went off like that. And he seemed to have forgotten most of what happened, including what triggered the incident. In fact, the exact words he'd used when she asked him about it were, "Whoa. I did that, come on Yuzuki, that's not like me at all." The only details he did remember were her defending him and acquiring his new clothes. Yuzuki looked at her Naruto and since they could see everything in each other's eyes, he knew what she was asking. He shrugged and she knew he was as surprised as herself. She would need to look into the matter later. When she looked at the afternoon sky and realized how much time had passed on this errand, Yuzuki decided the best course of action would be to wait for Jiraiya's return before returning to Konoha. She knew she needed to get in as much training as she could, and she also had serious doubts about the completeness of Naruto's training. Naruto had always been so strong in her eyes, but she now had to wonder just how much stronger Naruto should have been when he returned. From what Yuzuki knew in the original timeline, Naruto had yet to learn how to fully utilize the potential of his trademark techniques, the Shadow Clone and the Rasengan, and while he had shown considerable improvement in most of the basics, the number of new jutsu or variants of already known jutsu he'd picked up during the 2 years he'd been taken out of Konoha was disappointingly low. In fact, she only remembered him learning the transparency jutsu and giant Rasengan. He had not gained his most formidable abilities, Sage Mode and full control over Kurama's chakra, until after Jiraiya's death, and she had no idea if Naruto had been taught any other techniques during his time away from Konoha. It almost seemed like Jiraiya had not truly focused on Naruto's training at all. It was something she would have to ask both the Sannin and the Ghost Naruto about once she got the chance, even though she doubted she would get much of an answer from either of them. And if she did not receive satisfactory answers, she would need to rectify as many of the problems with Naruto's lack of training as she could by herself. Yuzuki would not allow this timeline's Hinata to lose her Naruto because of inadequate training. The first thing Yuzuki thought when she saw the pitch-black surroundings was that she was about to suffer from another of her lucid nightmares. The second was that sometimes she would forget how to tell the difference between her nightmare realm and the real world, because every day since that day had felt like an unending nightmare. What cruelties does my mind want to make me suffer this time? She wondered aloud as she walked through the darkness, and felt the sensation of water splashing between her feet. After a little inspection, Yuzuki determined that her dream had placed her inside a sewer. It was of little comfort, knowing she was not in the real world, but also knowing she would at least not have to relive the same nightmare that plagued her almost every night. She would not have to relive the memory of watching Naruto die in her arms, or any of the various ways her mind would pervert that memory. The worst nightmare of all, and also the one that reoccurred most often, started with images from the dream selected for her by the infinite Tsukuyomi. Everything would be so perfect at first, with her and Naruto sitting down on a bench in one of Konoha's parks, and her resting her head on his shoulder. But then everything changed abruptly. Day turned to night, the sun was replaced by the blood-red glow of the Rinne Sharingan reflected off the moon, and Yuzuki was no longer in the park, but was back on the final battlefield, which was littered with corpses and wooden shrapnel. She would cling to Naruto, hoping he could assuage her fear, but to her horror she discovered that he was just another of the victims fatally pierced by the wood style, cutting jutsu Obito used to decimate the Shinobi Alliance. She would then hear evil laughter from above her, and to her horror she would find the Jubi staring down at her, but instead of Madara and Obito controlling the monstrosity, it was Black Zetsu. The sickening sound of his laugh would pierce through her soul as he once more commanded the Jubi to rain down those wooden spikes on the battlefield. And then she would wake up in a cold sweat, screaming. But this was an entirely new nightmare for her to experience. She allowed herself to wander down the sewer, not trying to escape the newest scenario conjured by her mindscape. But she was soon about to learn that she wasn't in her mindscape. "Oh no, this is most certainly not a dream, young Hyuga," a guttural voice roared, pushing Yuzuki back with the sheer force of its breath. She spun around and sure enough, there was a giant metal gate locked shut by a large tag with the kanji for seal written on it. Behind that gate was the shadow of a fox that was many thousands of times larger than her. "Kurama-sama," Yuzuki exclaimed, feeling a misplaced sense of relief from seeing the monster fox, completely unmindful of the consequences of using its true name in a timeline where it had yet to know freedom from its hate. The shadow disappeared and the orange fur of Kurama replaced it, staring down Yuzuki and raising an eyebrow at her greeting. "Well, that confirms my suspicions. Only my creator is supposed to know my true name. You can go on deceiving mortals all you want, but we Biju, who were spawned from the husk of the Jubi, possess a higher state of awareness. When someone such as yourself has broken the laws of time, we are instantly alerted to the transgression. So do not try to deceive me." Yuzuki was left stunned by Kurama's accusations and insinuations. The kitsune knew she had traveled through time. She tried to speak up to defend herself, but the ability to form words abandoned her. "Do not try to beat around the bush, either," Kurama went on, lowering its head to deliver a more intense stare. "I have no interest in most of the events of your future and could not care less about why you have arrived in this time. But you are a threat to my safety as well as that of the brat I have to put up with while the 8 trigram seal keeps me imprisoned inside him. But I am curious as to what sort of relationship you had with the brat in the future. You have only just met him, and yet he already trusts you. That is not normal. You are not his mother or any reincarnation of her. Obviously, I made sure she was killed along with that blasted 4th Hokage during my few moments of freedom. That could only make you a close friend, or... Kurama stopped for a moment as it came to a major realization, and then gave Yuzuki a sinister grin. "It seems that my creator has picked up a sense of humor since he died. Who would have thought he would have the audacity to bring the brat's tragic lover across the time stream? Kurama roared in mocking laughter at the revelation, and Yuzuki shook in anger, clenching her fists. If there was one thing besides Zetsu that she hated, it was anyone who would dare to belittle Naruto or to mock or question her feelings for him. But she forced herself to remain silent. I do not particularly care how my container moved on from his obsession with his pink-haired teammate in your timeline, but I must confess I am impressed with the taste he is currently too stupid to notice he has. How did he manage to win you over? Did he drop down to all fours and beg like a pathetic dog for you to stay? I cannot see why a Hyuga would take interest in the brat as anything other than a slave. Shut up, Yuzuki spoke through clenched teeth. Kurama obeyed for the moment, but only out of intrigue. The kitsune observed that the young woman was at least more cognizant than its container and completely lacked his youthful ignorance. She was fully aware of the power it wielded, yet her shaking was not because she was afraid. How interesting. Being brought into my presence does not impress you or make you cower in fear. You would rather choose to be angry at me. Why do you care what I feel towards you right now? Yuzuki snapped. Kurama's eyes narrowed and it pressed its head ever closer to the bars as a last effort to unnerve the intruder in its container's mindscape. Do not attempt to conceal your negative emotions from me, human. Even if I was not gifted with the ability to sense them, the look in your eyes tells me all I could ever need to know. Yuzuki had to bite back a retort. The fox was unwilling to listen and she lacked the words to explain how it was wrong about everything, so she forced herself to remain silent. But then it decided to push her over the edge with its next words. If you need someone to blame for his death, you are pointing your finger at the wrong entity. I do not know or care how the kid died in the future, but I can sense that I was not responsible for ending his existence. If you mean to pin the blame on someone, blame it on that accursed Uchiha who ripped me out of his mother's stomach while her seal was weakened from childbirth. Had it not been for the Madara impersonator's ambition, the kid would not have had to live the empty life of a Jinchuriki. He would have enjoyed a long life full of happiness, becoming the vessel of love his mother often called herself, and sickened me even more. Faye, humans are ridiculous creatures to be able to invent the insipid concept of love, and frankly, I am astounded that anyone could show him either platonic or romantic love. Such feelings are a weakness which elude my comprehension, and just the thought of consummating that love is almost as disgusting as the way this kid lives his life. No manners, no respect. His lifestyle is closer to an animal's, such as the lack of regard he has for his own well-being. If you want my opinion, you should have moved on and left him to his female teammate. They share just enough similarities that it would be a fitting match, if the object of his crush ever starts crushing back. But a Hyuga showing such asinine emotions for him, allowing such weakness to cripple you. That cost you the minute amount of respect I hold for your clan. You're horrible, Yuzuki gritted out. What were you expecting? Humans are no different than cattle from my perspective. But you, who can trace your lineage to my creator's brother, might pass for something more. But no matter. Even if you manage to prevent the fate which befell my container in your future, you will only be delaying the inevitable. And it will be all the sweeter to me if you manage it. It only took me moments after being sealed to acquire a complete understanding of the seal that keeps me trapped inside the kid. Sooner or later, my plans to escape this prison, killing him in the process, will come to fruition. Yuzuki's head slumped and her indigo hair blocked her eyesight. You were right about one thing, Kurama, she said, having lost all the respect she gained for him in her future. It all started with you. You're the reason everyone hated Naruto-kun. You're the reason he was lonely his entire life, but you did not kill him. No, the truth is, and she lifted her head, giving the monster fox a sad smile, but one filled with pride, Naruto-kun defeated you. Kurama snarled at Yuzuki's claim. You would dare to mock me, petulant child. I am only stating the truth. Even with all the power you claim to possess, between you, me and Naruto-kun, you are the only one here who is weak. You are weaker than Naruto-kun because of your hate. You are incapable of defeating Naruto-kun with your hatred. No matter how hard you might make Naruto-kun fall, he will always rise again. Kurama roared in mocking laughter. You claim that your intended mate cannot be defeated. And yet you are here, proving you a liar. Why else would you be here, if the kid did not die? Naruto-kun was never beaten. Yuzuki shouted defiantly. Naruto-kun was cheated. The vehemence with which she roared caught Kurama off guard, and the kitsune actually walked away from the edge of its cage. Struck down by a coward when he tried to help me. And you, she hissed as she activated her Byakugan, you were his friend. His partner. Naruto-kun trusted you with his life and you let him die. Kurama's stunned silence only lasted a few moments before it burst out laughing once more. Biwahahaha. Friends. With that brat, this proves what I said about my creator picking up a sense of humor. Clearly you are the court jester of the Hyuga, if they decided to hire one in your time, and are fittingly naive. Never in my existence would I ever allow a lowly, piteous human to befriend me, especially one who was chosen as my jailer. Mock me all you want now, Yuzuki muttered before vanishing. An instant later, she reappeared inside the cage and her hands glowed blue. But you will not mock Naruto-kun ever again. It is only because of his kindness that you were ever accepted by the people of Konoha. In her righteous rage, she achieved a feat that she had not performed since the war, combining two of the most devastating taijutsu of the Hyuga clan, the 8 trigrams, 64 palms and the gentle step, twin lion fists. Yuzuki lashed out at Kurama, each palm thrust slicing at its fur and astoundingly, even managed to inflict some amount of pain. 2, 4, 8, 16, 32, and then finally, a full 64 palms connected with the chakra construct, and upon the landing of the last blow Kurama was launched back like a cannonball. Kurama rose to its feet and snarled at Yuzuki, ready to destroy her completely with its counterattack. You foolish mortal girl, you cannot hope to win against me even with the power Hamura awakened inside of you. And you even made the mistake of stepping inside my cage. It will be the last thing you'll ever regret in your pathetic life. And then it lunged at Yuzuki, who braced herself for her impending death. Her anger towards the Biju had clouded her judgment, leading her to make the fatal mistake of putting herself in a position where Kurama could shatter her mind beyond repair. But the Biju never got the chance to crush her in its jaws. Yuzuki's sight was blinded by light, and she was expelled from Naruto's mindscape. XX. Yuzuki shot up into a sitting position, breathing rapidly after her experience. The ghost Naruto looked at her with alarm and soothingly rubbed her back, coaxing her to relax and breathe more slowly. After about a minute, she successfully regained her composure and sighed. I'm sorry, Naruto-kun, Yuzuki said. It's just that, she went on to describe the encounter with Kurama which had transpired during her sleep. The look in Naruto's eyes indicated that he was impressed with her taijutsu display when she was pushed to attack, but he was frowning at her, telling her without the words he could not say that he greatly disapproved of the altercation between his mate and the Biju. If you could speak, you would ask me what I was thinking, yes. Still frowning at her, Naruto nodded. Of course he would have scolded anyone who attacked Kurama out of the blue like that and lived to tell the tale. Her actions in his younger self's mindscape reeked of insanity. And while he knew she would hate him for it if he ever tried, a part of him wanted to just lock her away from all danger and treat her with the care she deserved, until her mind and heart had healed and weren't so fragile anymore. You'll have to forgive me, Naruto-kun, but I cannot stand it anymore, Yuzuki explained. I could not stand it in the past, either. Each time someone belittled or mistreated you, my deepest desire was to punish them and make them see differently, but my own issues held me back. But no more. It does not matter to me who does it. I refuse to let anyone talk badly about you or your younger self ever again. Though she spoke only the truth, her old tendencies still kicked in and made it hard for her to be assertive towards her Naruto. The whole time she was speaking, there was a slight blush on her cheeks. Kurama is being difficult again, I see, an all too familiar voice intruded on the intimate moment. Yuzuki and the ghost Naruto both sprung to their feet and turned outside to find Hagoromo hovering near the fire pit, again having misused his creation of all things ability to produce a frying pan, this time with bacon. Is this truly necessary? An extremely annoyed Yuzuki demanded. Or are you just trying to keep me upset with you by keeping me under constant surveillance like my clan used to do? It saddens me that I must remind you of why my visits are required, the Sage of Six Paths replied in a disapproving tone. I am only trying to guide you down the right path. I cannot intervene more directly in this timeline unless the Jubi is again reformed, or an even greater threat replaces it. I can only act as a guide to help you make the choices needed to secure a better future. Also, being transcended does not stop me from feeling lonely sometimes, he confessed. Yuzuki went from annoyed to incensed. So, you are allowed to be selfish, but I do not have that same right. You're the oldest hypocrite in the world. Spare me your melodrama, Byakugan princess. If I possessed the power to indulge in selfishness, this ordeal would already be over. I told you before we traveled back in time that just because I am transcended does not make me omnipotent. Now, can you put your misgivings aside for right now and display some hospitality? Perhaps, but only barely. Yuzuki sighed and glanced towards her right, then groaned and rubbed her eyes as she saw the first rays of sunlight pierce the morning sky. It was a bit of a struggle to rectify her behavior in front of the Rakudo Sennin, but she knew that venting her anger would do her no good. Maybe I'm just a little cranky from waking up so early. I haven't been a morning person since that day. There was no time for a more gentle awakening. A messenger toad will arrive here within 30 minutes instructing you to return to Konoha immediately, without Jiraiya-san. Our discussion must occur now. Very well. Yuzuki sighed and sat down at Hagoromo's behest, allowing herself to relax just a little in the ghost Naruto's embrace. When time returns to normal, there will be enough food left behind for the living Naruto and yourself to enjoy a proper breakfast. Now, you are wondering about the episode you had inside Naruto.